Well, we told you earlier about the strikes by Russia. The first three-way talks between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States have ended with no apparent breakthrough following renewed Russian bombardment of Ukrainian targets. We will be joining Joy John live from Washington, D.C. to discuss the recent development from the two sides. That's Ukraine, Russia, the strikes and how it could, or it is affecting the ongoing trilateral negotiations. Good to have you, Joy John. Thank you for squeezing in the time to talk to us.
Thanks for having me.
Right, Ukraine has accused, Russia of the brutal strikes that occurred overnight. How does that impact the dynamics of the peace talks? We know that talk, the two has ended without a headway.
I will tell you, I think it's going to make diplomacy harder. Any talks that had started will be stalled of some sort. When people wake up to news of overnight strikes, it changes the moods instantly for the citizens. And it also makes trust harder. The citizens will begin to question if indeed the talks that their government is leading is actually having a headway. But even if the talks continue afterwards, I think one question will remain hanging. Are we really here for peace, or is Russia trying to buy time with all of this, strikes in between talks? So that's where things stand now.
Now, do you think that these strikes by Russia will lead to a hardening of positions or a renewed push for negotiations, seeing that happened overnight?
Oh, absolutely, Olujay. In the moment, or in this moment, it's definitely going to harden positions because leaders cannot afford to look flexible after such a violent act on its people. That said, I think a prolonged escalation from Russia can push a quiet diplomacy behind the scenes. I said that earlier, when you talked about what, the impact was, because that's escalation is going to shift diplomacy away. So publicly, even if things look like they're calm, I can tell you that, the pressure behind will be more.
So do we really know what concessions Russia is seeking in exchange for a potential ceasefire? And are they linked to Ukraine's NATO membership bid or other security arrangements? Particularly at the center of this conversation is the Donbas region.
So it's interesting you asked that. Yes, we know the broad outlines that what Russia is asking for, but we really don't know or can't say for sure the ultimate ask by Russia. Russia has over time consistently increased, or I would say raised, issues around territory, their security guarantees, and Ukraine's alignment with NATO. But what's missing in this picture, Lydia, is clarity on what Russia would really actually accept to stop fighting. And it is that uncertainty that keeps them in control of the pace.
So given the U.S. brokered talks, right, what leverage do Western countries have to pressure Russia to de-escalate? And how might this affect the global balance for power?
Western leverage comes from consistency. You have the sanctions, military support, and diplomacy. They all reinforce one another when they are aligned. But none of this delivers instant results. But over time, it's going to shape the choices that are available to Russia. But when you go back to the books of history, Olij, and look at the conflicts that had happened over time and how they have played out, you will see that the steady pressure has been more impactful than any, dramatic gesture we see today.
So how do the EU sanction on Russia impact the conflict, and will that impact the conflict?
No, not at all. They won't stop the war immediately, but it will help, I would say contribute and shape in its trajectory. The impact of sanctions on Russia will just slowly limit their economic flexibility and I would say long-term capacity to do what they have to do, because it's like in layman terms of wrestling someone, wrestling or tying their arms. But more importantly, they communicate that time is not neutral. And in saying that, even when adaptation happens, the cumulative pressure over time continues to narrow the options that they have. So yes, while it will not stop the war immediately, they do have an impact on crippling the Russian economy.
So I'm going to go back to the Donbas region because it's a major sticking point here. What are the, potential compromises on, the offer, and could a retention or referendum or other mechanisms, be used to determine the region's future?
Yeah, so I will tell you, Donbass has been the bone of contention, right? It's a place, or it's an area or region that Russia is not willing to release. Putin has been very clear. If you look at the onset of the war, and it's again, we all talk about the war and think it started a few years ago. If you go back, it's been on for years. So it's not easy to really give a yes or no answer to this, or even give you a clear picture. It's all gray, but one thing that's clear in all the gray areas that we have, the one white dot we see is that that's an area that Putin is not willing to release onto to Ukraine at this time. It will continue to be in contention.
Now, finally, before I let you go, Joy John, what happens if this trilateral negotiations, fail to yield results? That's just been one of the, because we've had bilateral conversations, we've had the EU, we've talked about sanctions. It's been on and on and on. What if that happens, or this falls on, a deaf ear, or we don't come to a conclusion with these talks between the three countries? What happens?
That's a technical question, Olivia. Thank you for asking that. We cannot, we don't have a crystal ball to see what plays out, but I will say if the talks fail, the war does not end. It settles in. The fighting will continue, boots on ground, the pressure will deepen, and of course, diplomacy will thin out because with the diplomacy has been applied, but it has not been impactful. And that's often the most dangerous phase, because a conflict now becomes normalized, and once that happens, resolution becomes harder. So unfortunately, we don't have a crystal ball here. We're just going to have to watch it as it unfolds. But yeah, that's a very technical one, Alicia.
I know. We're looking forward to next week because they're already proposing that they might have another meeting next week. So let's see how that happens. Thank you for making our time again. I know what you had to go through to join us tonight. Appreciate you.